Welcome, everybody, to Freelance Writing Direct. I'm your host, Estelle Erasmus, the author of Writing That Gets Noticed, Find Your Voice, Become a Better Storyteller, Get Published, which was named by Poets and Writers a best book for writers. Every week, I speak with novelists, with authors, with writers of every niche to talk about their tips, their tricks, their strategies, and how the sauce is made, including creative advice. I'll talk about essays and articles and share my own experience from 3 decades of publishing. So join me every week and grow your business and build your craft with Freelance Writing Direct. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. And follow along on Substack, where I share special clips for subscribers only at estelleserasmus.substack.com. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Freelance Writing Direct. I'm your host, Estelle Erasmus, and today I am delighted to have Barbara DeMarco-Barrett with us. And she is author of the haunting, vivid new story collection, Pool Fishing. And we're going to get all into that. But first, a little bit about Barbara. Her short story, Rowboat, included in the book, was nominated for a Pushcart Prize. And she has also published Palm Springs and Pen on Fire, a busy women's guide to igniting the writer within. And Crazy for You, published in Orange County Noir, was included in USA Noir Best of Akashic Noir series. And noir is important, and we're going to get into that. She teaches at various places, including Saddleback College and Gotham Writers Workshop, and is taught at UC Irvine, where she received a Distinguished Instructor Award. She is creator, executive producer, and host of the award-winning podcast, Writers on Writing. Welcome, Barbara.
Hi, Estelle. Good to see you again.
We've known each other for years, and I have long admired your work. And so I'm so excited to dive into pool fishing. Now, you were interviewed for Crime Reads, and you talked about the influence of noir, film noir, on your work and on how you wanted to kind of focus your writing in this next iteration. So can you talk a little bit about the genesis of pool fishing and also the feeling of noir, which you brought so aptly into your work?
Sure. I was writing a lot of literary fiction, and I was having trouble getting it published. And so, because my characters talked a lot, but nothing ever happened, because in literary fiction is heavy in character and language. So typically, writers of literary fiction are focusing on that as opposed to plot. And so I had trouble getting published. I got a few little things published. And then I was at the LA Times Festival of Books. I was in the green room, which is a perk for being on panels at the LA Times Festival of Books, all the food and just chairs you can sit in and relax and get out of the crowd. And I was at the buffet table with Susan Straight and T. Jefferson Parker, who are quite known out here, and they are nationally known as well. And Susan said, Gary Phillips, who is a crime writer, who's known in the crime writing community, is editing Orange County Noir, and you might get in touch with him because I think he needs a story for Costa Mesa, which is an Orange County city. And I got in touch with Gary, and he's like, yeah, go for it. I'm like, yes, but I had no idea how to write noir. It's like, what do? I was a fan of noir film, all those old 40s and 50s noir films. And I spent a summer really kind of getting up to speed on how you write noir. James Cain and Patricia Highsmith, all of these authors who were expert at it. And I turned in my story, and he liked it and took it. And then it got included in the Best of Noir, which blew my mind because, it was my first story. And then I just found that it was something I like to do. Something happened. Something has to happen in noir. It's a subgenre of the crime genre, right? It's the least popular, I think, because noir is more realistic than other forms of mysteries. I mean, the cozy subgenre, things turn out wonderfully at the end. A lot of the mystery genre, everything works out. Bad goes away, good is victorious. In noir, not necessarily. People get what they deserve pretty much. And there's not a ton of hope at the end of noir stories, which is strange because I'm a very hopeful, positive person. So why do I enjoy that? It's the characters and people making bad choices. And no matter how, they just can't seem to get ahead. Those kind of people just interest me. Those characters interest me. And so I kept on. And then I found that I started getting published more and started becoming known as someone who writes noir. I still write literary fiction. I write funny stories. I do other things, but this seemed to catch. And then I had all these stories. I think 15 are included in Pool Fishing, and Kelp Books, who publish Rowboat, as you mentioned, was interested in seeing the stories, and then they wanted to publish them. And that's kind of how it went.
That is so interesting that you built into a new genre for yourself and really kept going with it and got acclaim for it after doing literary nonfiction for so long. And so, what muscles of your writing muscles does this pull out of you as opposed to the other types of writing you've done?
Yeah, that's interesting because, as you know, when we were both very involved with ASJA, I was very much doing journalism. I was always writing fiction. I went to college, got involved in fiction, and that's really what I wanted to do. But it was kind of hard to make a living writing fiction, and it still is. But I've always been a fiction writer. And so maybe this comes from my journalism background or my foothold in reality, which is I take so much from my life and people I know or have known. There's only really two people in my life currently who are in the book, and they may be very upset if they read those stories, but oh well, that's the way it goes. But just being able to make things up as well so that I can embellish the situations I've been in or have observed or the people I've known so that it's not factual, right? I get to make things up. I get to deal with setting however I like. I get to deal with characters however I like. And so that is the fun part, I think, of writing noir and writing fiction.
You mentioned setting, and I had a couple of notes because you have so many interesting settings, but a lot of it is pool related, but there are also bars. There's so many different settings, and a lot of times the settings kind of make up the story, or they're just so important to the story. Was that a conscious decision, and how did you decide to do that? And also, how did the theme, because there is a definite theme, come up for you?
Yeah, because it's something I think about. Could a story take place anywhere, right? When a fiction writer sets a story in a particular place, can it take place anywhere? I think most of my stories, no. I think the stories that take place in Palm Springs really have to be in Palm Springs because the setting is very much a part of it. The people that take care of the properties, the pool maintenance guys who take care are a big deal in my stories. And then same with San Francisco, the Pink Aviary, it's very much a San Francisco story. It could not take place in Irvine down here. And then we come down the coast, same with the Southern California stories, the setting, the motel, converted motel, that's all really important to the stories. So setting dictates to some degree what happens in the stories, I think. I mean, in the first story, The Water Holds You Still, needs to be a pool. There needs to be a pool. There needs to be a pool maintenance guy. That needs to happen.
Ernesto.
Ernesto. I love Ernesto.
I do too.
Yeah, I mean, I think setting, at least I don't just write a story and then go, well, let's see, where should I put it? I usually have in mind where it's going to be to begin with, because you want to root the reader in setting right from the start so that kind of where it is. The setting is going to, in part, dictate perhaps what happens or how it goes.
What about the order of the story? Because you had, the first one, The Water Holds You Still, that was your first one. And then you ended with pool fishing. So the title of the book. Like, how did you decide on that structure?
That's a great question because that's something when you're doing a short story collection, they have to connect in some way. These days, I think it's very difficult unless you're a brand name author and you have novels out that are already popular and best-selling. Agents and publishers are really reluctant to take on short story collections because they don't sell well, I guess. I mean, everybody's reading short stories, but agents like to say, well, they'll read one short story in the New Yorker. There's not 10, or literary journals, but collections are difficult. So I was looking for how to connect them. And what I decided was I would order them in terms of geography. Well, first of all, because I wanted the collection to be called Pool Fishing. It's typical that you end a collection with the title story. You don't have to, but that tends to be the way it goes. You end with the title. So I wanted the title to be Pool Fishing because I wanted water to be in the cover. I love swimming pools, as you know from the stories. I wanted that to be the cover. And so that meant that it had to end with pool fishing. And so I started in the desert. If I had wanted to end with The Water Holds You Still, it would have been in the reverse. We would have started in Southern California with Costa Mesa, Irvine, go up to San Francisco, and then the desert. But as it was, we were going to end with pool fishing. And so it started in the desert and then went north to San Francisco and then south to Orange County.
There's a lot of movement. There's travel, there's going to different locations, to different bars, and then the theme of the pools.
There's a lot of water. And I didn't even realize that until somebody pointed that out to me at one of these events. Like, do you know there's water in just about every story? And I went, I didn't realize, but now I'm realizing it. I knew, of course, a few of them, very much water was a part of the story. As pool fishing, we needed that swimming pool for what to happen.
And how did you decide on the title? It's a great title, Pool Fishing, because everyone knows the noun pool, what it is. And I always say, I tell my students, active verbs work really well in titles, whether it's titles of articles or essays or books. And so fishing is an active verb, and it could also be a metaphor for so much, right? Fishing about how your life's going to go, fishing for compliments. I don't know. I just think of fishing with so many different ways. So combining pool and fishing and then the darkness of the cover, but showing a single solitary person, which is so important to that story that you lead with. And it says pool fishing stories. How did you decide on that for the title?
Well, the story Pool Fishing I wrote a long time ago. I think it was for like the Mystery Writers of America contest. And it didn't win, but then it got placed in another journal and a couple of other places too. But, that's what that character does. She sees things in the pool out her window at the converted motel. Placentia Arms, I think, is where she's living. She sees something in the pool and she fishes it out. And at some point, the title just became Pool Fishing for that story. And then in terms of the title itself, I'm also thinking of something Amy Tan's agent told me a long time ago when I had her on Writers on Writing, because I asked about the Joy Luck Club. I said, that's such an interesting title. How did you come up with the title? And she said, for anybody who's read the Joy Luck Club, Amy Tan's first novel, there's a card playing group. The narrator's parents are in this club, the Joy Luck Club. And she said, I think Amy Tan's title had originally been something like Waves in the Dusk or something very ethereal. And Sandra Dykster's like, no, that's not a title. The Joy Luck Club places words beside one another that you would never see, right? You would never see otherwise. That's a best-selling title. And so that's what Amy Tan's first book became, The Joy Luck Club. So pool fishing, like what you were saying, it's like two words, like what do they mean together, right? It's like, well, what do you mean? Somebody's fishing in a pool, somebody's looking, what does it mean? For me, it was an intriguing title. Like I would notice that because when I read journals, when I look at collections of stories or novels, even titles, I think are just so important too. It's like the doorway, right? The doorway into a book.
I agree. And you hit on a good one. And I love that story about Amy Tan. I was thinking of the protagonists. I mean, you have so many women protagonists in pool fishing, and yet they're not all good, not all bad. Some of them are bad girls. Some of them are, people I probably wouldn't know in my life. But what you do manage to do throughout the stories is keep this feeling as the reader that we have as empathy for the characters. And that's craft. So, how do you do that? Because I remember an interview with Jenny Han, who wrote The Summer I Turned Pretty, which I became obsessed with this summer for some reason, more than my 16-year-old daughter. Go figure. And she said when she was casting for the character of Belly, which is Lola Tongue, she wanted somebody that the audience would be with, even during the messiness, even during the mistakes, that they would still feel empathy for the character. And that really stayed with me because I'm working on my own memoir right now, which is about my days as the dating diva in the magazine world of the 90s and early O's before I met my husband. And, I wasn't all good. I made a lot of mistakes.
Right, right.
And so it's how do you portray the protagonist that way and still have the reader with you? I want to know.
Yeah, well, that is something that I think I learned along the way, which is, I mean, even with villains, somebody loves the villain, right? They have a mother, a wife, a husband, somebody loves them and they love somebody. Maybe they have a child or a pet, or they do volunteer work somewhere and then they do their nefarious deeds other times, right? So I think like, well, what's good about this character? What good does he or she do? Well, she, because most of them, I think, are all female protagonists, I believe. Like in the first story, Greta cares about her mother, even though she ends up doing something not very nice to her brother. But she leaves her home to go see her mom because her mom is not doing well. So right away, we care for her because she's caring for her mother. You give a character a pet, or you have them volunteer somewhere, or they do something good, right? They're not just all out for themselves. I mean, the best characters and the most interesting people are complex. And so how to make characters complex, I think, and like writing a memoir, I'm sure you're talking about your flaws as well as the good stuff, right? Because nobody's perfect. And then as I think readers of fiction or memoir, we empathize. We want to empathize. And if a character or the narrator has flaws, then that brings us deeper in because we have flaws, right?
Yeah. You did it so well because I mean, in one of your stories, well, in many of your stories, somebody gets killed, but in one of your stories, a bad guy gets killed and the female protagonist, this is the bar story.
And like the ending, right? The end is with pool fishing, where the narrator takes care of the burly dude. She does something that is illegal, but she also did something that she had to do to help a woman. Right. So it's not just I'm out to get people or, avenge wrongs. It's that I need to do this, but I have to do this too.
Yes, yes. And there are lots of twists in your stories too. So there's that character Billy, and then how he has a twist to him. People are not always who they seem to be. And that's very much the culture of noir, right?
I mean, complexity again. I think the best noir characters and the best noir stories are complex. One of my favorite movies is Double Indemnity, which, Barbara Stanwyck and Fred McMurray, they're planning something rotten, but yet we're cheering them on. We're watching them because there's this part of them that, at least with the Fred McMurray character, Neff, he didn't want to, he's like, he doesn't want to be that person, but he's ending up to be that person. I think that's how it goes in noir. I think the best noir characters just can't help themselves. They cannot help themselves.
So I think you've been quoted as saying like you find inspiration from different sources and you sort of have a file bank in your mind of ideas. How do you find that inspiration? Like, what is it? Are you just an observer of life?
It's a really great question. I'm constantly writing down titles and characters, and I just wrote one down, The Shallow End, which would be another pool story, right? Where something happens because of the shallow end of the pool. Then it's like, well, what could happen there? What would the character do? And who would be in that? And then something else comes into it, or maybe I observe something happening around me and I go, well, now that has to go into that. Do you know what I mean? So I don't know. I don't know how other people write fiction, but I have a friend who says the worst advice is to write what you know. Do not write what you know. And I said, that's funny because so much of it's in my stories is what I know. And he's like, well, that works for you, but I can't write what I know. And so I think it's just all the different people and experiences, they really are filed in there. And I really do want to use so much of that in stories. And it's everything I can do to resist because I'm working on a novel and I have these story ideas. And it's like, no, you have to finish the book first. You can't do it. And I'm like physically like holding myself back. Do not get another tablet. Do not open another document.
Which do you find more difficult? Writing, because you wrote Pen on Fire, so that's a nonfiction like help book about writing, story writing or novel writing? Curious.
Well, stories are easier than a novel, and you can jump around too. And a story takes maybe a month, sometimes months, depending. So, I mean, but then a novel, you get to dive in, you get to go deep, maybe like memoir versus essays, right? With essays, there's all these different things you could write about different essays, but a memoir, you get to go into this one, which is you, but some aspect of you, some aspect of your life, right? With fiction, it's like that, it's like stories are fun, but a novel, you get to go deep. Which is better? I don't know. I mean, I think if short stories paid, if you could actually make a living writing short stories, I might just do that all the time, right? But you can't. I mean, agents want novels, and I do enjoy it, but it's different. It just takes a whole different kind of mindset, I think, to stay with a novel because all these other ideas are just swimming around trying to get your attention.
Do you write every day? Are you like getting on your novel every day?
Yeah, because I want to finish this draft by Christmas. And so a few weeks ago, I was at a residency, an artist residency. And there I came up with, a friend got me into writing sprints, 20 minutes on, 5 minutes off, 20 minutes on. And you do this for a few hours. And I came away from that going, well, I want to finish my book by Christmas, the draft, the first draft. So how many words do I need by then? Well, I want the book to be 80,000 words. So how do I do that? Well, 5,000 words a week until Christmas. And so what I've done is not make it be a word count per day, but a word count per week. Actually, my week is Monday to Sunday. I need to write 5,000 words. However, I can get those done. And so I said to my husband, I need a punishment. I need to do this. What's going to happen to me if I don't make my 5,000 word minimum? And so we came up with, I would make dinner 4 nights in a row because I never do that. I mean, he does more of the cooking and I do more of the cleanup. I don't want to make dinner 4 nights in a row. Okay, that's my punishment. And that has driven me to do 5,000 words
I love
a
that.
week, or a little more. But yeah, I have to do it. And you have to be accountable to yourself and whatever it takes. I mean, some people have accountability partners, but mine is to myself and to dinner and not making dinner. And so, yeah, I pretty much have to do it every day or 5 days a week. I mean, there's usually a busy day in there where I teach, and some days are busier than others, but I keep a running tally of word count so that by Sunday, if I'm not at 5,000 yet, I better sit there and get there, or else I'm going to have to make dinner 4 nights in a row.
See, for me, for memoir, and maybe I'm just different because I've written so much of so many different stories that it just overwhelmed me. So I'm just focusing just on structure at the moment because the stories are there. Then I have to plug in and connect and all that. But that's, I think, the difference. I think with novel, yes, I mean, as long as you know, are you a pantser or a plotter?
Well, a little bit of both. I subscribe to the save the cat writes a novel theory, right? Where you need to know the beats. So I know certain things. I knew at the end of Act One what would happen there at the midpoint. I know how it's going to end. So I know what's happening here and there, but I would never write an outline like a 10-page outline. I think I tried that once and I hated it so much I didn't want to write the book. So I hate the book now. I hate the book. So I'm a little bit of both. I do need to know the beats because you can waste an awful lot of time trying to figure out where you're going. If you don't know, well, I mean, because you don't get in a car and just take off, you kind of have an end point. You might not know the route, but you have an end point.
Absolutely. I'm excited to hear where this is going to go. This is exciting. We have to talk about you are the reason that podcasts like mine exist and other podcasts about writing and editing and all the different components because you started Writers on Writing as a radio program in 1998. Wow. Look at you.
It's crazy.
I mean, before it was even an idea to do these kind of things. How did that happen? And congratulations on this longevity.
All very
Yes.
kind of you to say. Let's see, I was doing a lot of journalism and I was trying to sell Pen on Fire. And I had an agent. Did I have an agent yet? Or maybe I didn't have an agent yet, but I had a publisher interested. And the editor liked it. It went to marketing. Marketing said, who is she? Of course, she doesn't have a national spread. We can't do this book. And I thought, well, platform. That's when that word came up, right? Platform. What's my platform? Well, what would I like to do? How could I become more national? I don't know. And I was doing journalism and I was writing features and I was writing for a metropolitan glossy here in Orange County called Orange Coast Magazine, which was, I don't even think it's still publishing, or is it? I don't know. They were doing a lot of exposés, human feature stories. I mean, really had a great editor, Marty Smith. He was so wonderful. And I did a story on an animal activist in Orange County who started Orange County People for Animals, which was a big deal at the time. So one day I followed her around, like, what's your day? I just went wherever she went. And one of her stops was at KUCI FM, which is the radio station on the UC Irvine campus. And I had no idea there was a radio station there. And so I'm sitting in the studio as she did her program. The wheels are spinning. And I'm thinking, that's something I could do. I could do a radio show. They were streaming live. It was streaming. So it wasn't just on the radio locally. Thought I could do that. And so I went through the FCC training and all of that and got approved, got licensed, and then started interviewing authors because that's what I wanted to do because I thought, well, this could be like my own private MFA program, whatever I'm working on. I will have that author on the show and maybe they can be helpful. They'll help me and everybody who's listening. And that's kind of how it went. Platform. And then 2005 or maybe 2004, I thought, well, we should archive this show, right? Because just so it's archived. And a former student was very into the show and he was helping me do things with it. He's like, no, you got a podcast. I'm like, podcast? What's podcast?
It's radio 2.0, really.
I know. He's like, believe me, you're going to want a podcast because this is coming. I just believed him because I trusted him. And that's how the podcasting started in 2005. So we were on the radio really until after COVID. When COVID hit, we had to do the show from home because no one was allowed into the station. And so we all got our equipment, our good microphones and got on Zoom and, learned how to do that. And then when the station opened up again, Marie, my co-host, and I went, you know what, we don't need to do that anymore. We can just podcast because it's so much more convenient to just do it from home. And more of our listeners were listening on podcasts, not locally. And so, we would hear from listeners when the podcast would go down, get an email from outback of Australia. Where's the podcast? I can't find it. It's like, oh, so we have a listener in Australia. That's cool. So yeah, that's how it started and then continued.
And how many guests would you estimate you've had over the years?
Between Marie and I now at this point, because she's been with me more than a decade, a couple thousand probably. You know, a lot have been lost because we had a server failure a few years ago and we just couldn't recover all of them. But I mean, there's still on the writersonwriting.com website, there's an archive of shows that are free to whoever wants to listen.
That's fantastic. I'm going to share all of that in the show notes. Well, Barbara, this has been such a great conversation, and everyone needs to read this book because it is not only a journey that you go on, you find great characters, great stories, and real craft in every single one of the pages.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
It's been a delight, Estelle. Thanks.
Follow me at EstelleSErasmus.com on my website and on social media, which is Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at Estelle S. Erasmus. And we're now on YouTube for Freelance Writing Direct. Follow along, and soon everyone will be reading what you're writing.